Any other questions that you'd like to ask? If you have something that you think is a major historic one that you want to raise, we'll take a few more minutes.
I think one that's definitely dialogued and discussed more than any other one, or at least on the top list, would be Isaiah 53. Could you just give a brief explanation from the Jewish perspective and from the Christian or the Messianic perspective?
Sure. The majority of traditional Jewish commentaries, beginning with Rashi in the 11th century, say Isaiah 53, which is technically Isaiah 52:13 through 53:12. That's the section, beginning with Hine Yaskil Abdi, behold, my servant will act wisely or prosper. This passage, which probably more people have come to faith in Jesus reading that, more Jews than any other passage. One of my recent trips to India, I met a former Hindu doctor who is now a fervent follower of Jesus. He decided that he needed to know if there was one true God. He began to ask questions about his Hinduism. He began to search different religions, search the scriptures, and based on reading the scriptures from Isaiah 53, concluded that this is a true prophecy of Jesus, and therefore he must be the real Messiah, and he became a Christian. He suffered a lot for it in his family because of rejection, etc. But why this passage? This passage meant so much to me reading it through the years that says he was despised and rejected. We esteemed him stricken, afflicted by God, and yet he was wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. The famous words of Handel's Messiah, quote from this. Traditional Jewish commentaries, beginning with Rashi in the 11th century, primarily interpret this with reference to the nation of Israel, or specifically the righteous remnant within Israel. There's some ancient interpretations that point to an individual. Some Talmudic interpretations point to being Moses, point to it being the Messiah. Some others interpret it perhaps of a righteous remnant. But the mainline Jewish interpretation through the centuries has primarily seen it as referring to the nation of Israel as opposed to an individual. Why? The first reason is that it calls this one the Eved, the servant of the Lord. And you'll see elsewhere in Isaiah 40 through 53 that the servant of the Lord is frequently Israel. And that God speaks to them, and you are my servant Israel. Okay? Even says, Atem Edai, you are my witnesses. So it seems that the passage where it speaks of the servant of the Lord is speaking of a plural servant, therefore the nation of Israel as a whole, or the righteous remnant within it. That's a completely impossible interpretation. Cannot be, for a number of reasons. First, if you just do a little study, and I get into this in volume 3 of my Jewish Objection series, there's supposed to be a total of 3 volumes, but then I couldn't condense everything into volume 3, so I wrote a volume 4, but volume 4 ended up being over 600 pages, so there will be a volume 5. Someone said there are a lot of Jewish objections. There are. This volume 4 deals with objections based on the New Testament, and volume 5 deals with objections based on oral law and traditional Judaism. So 3 are out. Volume 4 is coming out later this year, God willing, and volume 5 sometime after that. And hopefully that will be it. 5-volume series, 1,500 pages, should be enough. So why do I say that it cannot be the nation as a whole? First, if you'll take all of the references to servant, you can even do this if you don't know Hebrew at all, just in an English concordance, you'll see that sometimes it refers to the nation as a whole, and sometimes distinctly to an individual, like Isaiah 49, which some rabbinic traditions apply to the prophet. Isaiah 42, some rabbinic traditions apply to the Messiah. There are other passages that it's ambiguous. Is this the nation? Is this a person? But after about halfway through the 44th chapter, if you look at every reference to the Eved, it's singular. Singular, it's an individual, it's not the people anymore. The 50th chapter is quite explicitly a person whose beard is plucked out. Okay, it's a person. So the predominant usage leading up to Isaiah 53 in the immediate chapters is an individual servant, not a plural servant. That's the first thing. The second thing, even some rabbinic tradition, the Targum, for example, recognizes 52:13 as applying to the Messiah. So the idea that no one interprets this applying to the Messiah except for Christians is wrong. Even rabbinic tradition does. More importantly, it cannot refer to the nation as a whole for several reasons. One is the servant is completely guiltless. The servant is innocent. The servant is called a righteous servant. He doesn't sin. All right? According to the Torah, if Israel is righteous as a nation, they'll receive blessing. If Israel sins as a nation, they'll receive curses. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. Therefore, if Israel as a nation is righteous, Israel as a nation is not going to be suffering and beaten and even killed. Okay? So it cannot refer to the nation. And at no point in our history have we been that perfectly righteous servant. What about the righteous remnant? Could it apply to the righteous remnant within the nation? No, for several reasons. One is that the language continues to be individualistic. The alleged plural references to it are absolutely bogus. Anyone that's scholarly in Hebrew would know that, and I'm not even going to get into that. The alleged plural references are simply not there. However, here's what it says. And let me just read one little section of this to you, okay? Listen to these verses. If this is applying to the righteous remnant, okay, it's Ish Machavot Vidur Cholia, a man of pains and intimate with sickness, Uchmaster Panim Imenu Nivzeh V'lo Chashavnu. So he's as one from whom we hid our faces, he was despised, we esteemed him not. Well, it seems to be speaking of an individual. Could it be speaking of a group, corporately? Okay, possibly. Then look at this. First, the people speaking are, through the prophets, it's really not the nations that are speaking, it's the people of Israel. So we are saying, it says here, surely our sicknesses he bore and our pains he carried. So if this is we, us, plural, speaking, the people of Israel, then he is taking our sins and our pains. The rabbis say, no, this is the kings of the earth, the nations, saying he, or the righteous remnant, took our pains. Right? The righteous remnant, they suffered for the nations. Okay? But we esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But now look at this. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Now look at this. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him. Question. When the Jewish people have suffered in the nations, when we have suffered because of the sins of others, when 1.5 million innocent Jewish children were slaughtered by the Nazis, did that bring healing to Germany? When the Babylonians smote our people in the days of Jeremiah, did that bring healing to Babylon? Hasn't it always been the rule that those that smite Israel, God will smite them? When children are blown up in Israel today by Hamas, does that bring healing to the Palestinians? Of course not. In other words, Jewish suffering has not brought healing to the nations. This text says the punishment that brought us peace is upon him, uvachavrato near palano, and by his wounds we are healed. Now, you say, does that apply to Jesus? Ask millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world that say, yes, by his wounds we received healing. We received forgiveness. We received peace. We received transformation. That's why we want to tell the whole world, because it's wonderful and we want to share this good news. We don't want to be anti-Semitic and withhold it from Jews while offering it to others. So the Jewish remnant, the righteous remnant, has never brought healing to those that smote it. Rather, God has judged them for smiting the Jewish people, especially the righteous among them, whereas this one, when he's smitten, brings healing and bears our sins. And then it goes on to say that he dies, then it goes on to say he rises from the dead. The only possible candidate for this is Yeshua. As many objections as are raised to it, and I cover them all in Volume 3 of Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus. And by the way, if you don't want to buy any of the books, just go to realmessiah.com. You can listen to some debates I've done with rabbis for free online, read some articles. We're going to be adding a lot of stuff there in the near future. Realmessiah.com or .org, either way. And you can read a synopsis of all the objections and answers in the first 3 volumes. So you'll see all the objections to Isaiah 53. You'll see all the answers. I love to just sit down with a Jewish person. I remember when my dad read it for the first time. He was mild-mannered, and you know, in control of his temper. He was a wonderful guy. And we were talking about my faith, and I said, somebody told me there's a problem. It's brand new. somebody told me there's a prophecy that says it was written hundreds of years before Jesus that he was going to suffer and die, and so and somewhere in there. So I went and got my King James Bible. It's all I had then, and I just flipped open and I found it and I showed him. And my dad, who was so mild-mannered, got furious when he read it, as if I had like manipulated in there in the Hebrew Bible or something. One of my friends brought to his father, when he became a believer, brought to his dad the Bible he got when he was bar mitzvahed and showed it to him. And his dad got furious. They changed it. The Christians changed it. His dad is the Bible I got when I was bar mitzvahed. Who changed it? In other words, it's so mightily clear, which is why there are all these different answers and objections. But it cannot apply to the nation under any score. Even to try to put this as the language of the Gentile kings is quite far-fetched. It's a lofty, beautiful theological piece. To put it on the language of, quote, pagan kings doesn't work. And it can't be the righteous remnant because their suffering has not brought healing to the nations, and those that died did not rise from the dead. So for those reasons and many others, it has to be Yeshua, it has to be Messiah. It's airtight, clear, verse for verse, word for word, letter for letter. There's nothing that can be raised that would say it's not him.